أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم تستر يا سيدي مدد يا Sultan مدد يا Sultan مدد. We ask for your support. Inshallah, open our hearts that we may convey to the audience a message that is truthful and accurate, inshallah. Subhanallah, Sultanullah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Sultanullah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Sultanullah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Madad ya Sultan, madad. Difficult subject today. Difficult because it's so vast, it's so enormous. What could be said about this subject would fill volumes and volumes and volumes of text, and still you're just scratching the surface of it. And what is amazing in the Muslim world today is that the importance of this is probably right after learning the five pillars. If it was my child, in an Islamic school, I would want them to learn their five pillars and then quickly thereafter find out what makes Islam so accurate and so correct and so trustworthy. That differentiates the Islamic knowledge from all other religions, and it is really what is at the root of understanding the reliability of the stories that you hear. Otherwise, they're just imagination. It's similar to the childhood game or the concept of telephone, where somebody tells somebody a story and then they tell somebody else a story and they tell somebody else a story. It's not just a childhood game. They've done scientific research on these things, and they've found that at the fifth level of the story being told or the 10th level of the story being told, it's just people's imagination takes over, and they focus on something that's important to them, and they leave off factual information, which is extremely important to the meaning and the original message that was given by the first person. So by the third generation, fifth generation, 10th generation, you have a completely, totally different story. And this is the problem, with religion and with these stories coming down from old. They get altered and changed over the years. This is not true in an Islamic system, which is, what differentiates the Muslim sciences in the Muslim world from, the rest of the knowledge that comes from different books and different religions. So it's not just the protection of the Quran, that the Quran has been preserved. It's also falls into the category of the sciences. And anytime you talk about a hadith, the first thing you do is you talk about the person who relayed that hadith or heard that hadith from either Prophet Muhammad ﷺ or from one of the reliable, trusted Sahaba. And it's based on that authenticity or that person's character that enables you to accept what they have said as being accurate and being true. And without that accurate, testimony from somebody who is able to be relied upon to convey the exact meaning of that prophetic example, it's thrown out. It's not considered strong, and it is, eliminated from the scholarship that would understand whether or not that was something that could be relied upon. There's a famous story about one person who put his hand out like this because he wanted to get his donkey to come so he could, take him and put his harness on him. And the donkey, of course, came over, and, maybe it was a camel, maybe a donkey, it was some sort of animal. And the animal came over and thought that it was going to get something to eat. And, of course, when he showed up to his hand, there was nothing in his hand. And there was somebody who witnessed that. And later, I think in the presence of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was, or maybe not in the presence of him, but it was conveyed by that person who made that gesture towards the donkey that he was reiterating or describing something that the Prophet had said. And the people were, able to accept it because they thought and understood that he was somebody who was reliable and honest. And he had to indicate to the, Khalifa at the time, if it was during Prophet Muhammad's lifetime or not. I don't think so. Probably came later. But what's important here is that the person conveyed to them that this person lied to the donkey, that he deceived the donkey. And this is an animal. I mean, this is not, telling somebody in business or, lying to, your spouse or lying to, a family member. This is a donkey, I just wanted him to come to put the harness on him. But it was a deception and it was a lie when you get right down to it. And based on that incident alone, they disregarded the story or the conveyance of the hadith that he was expressing, that so-and-so said this. And they said, no, we don't accept that anymore because your character is in question. So the standard that they had for people to be able to convey and teach the hadith was just absolutely enormous. And what we need to understand more importantly is that they didn't go to school and memorize, these hadith. They didn't even write them down until much later, that the information was in their heart. And it was said by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he poured his ilm, his knowledge, into the heart of Abu Bakr Siddiq, which, another story saying it said that if you put the iman, the belief of Abu Bakr Siddiq in a scale, you put the belief of everyone else in a scale combined, that Abu Bakr Siddiq's belief would be stronger and better than everybody else's. So we're talking about, an incredibly honorable, incredibly pious person. And that knowledge base, that understanding of heavenly, knowledge and heavenly understanding was poured into his heart. There was nothing called academia. There was nothing called, signing up for a certificate program. There was nothing called, tuition, and there was nothing, that made people sit down and memorize, rot information over and over and over again until they could spit it back out like a tape recorder. There's no need for those people, especially today with the internet. We have, just get on with Syria and say, Syria, please reiterate the hadith of Prophet Muhammad that deals with this subject matter, and then just, whole list of subject matter pertaining to that one area that you're interested in pops up on the internet, and you have a complete reference to all those. If it doesn't give you the isnad, they call it, the transmission, the chain of transmission back to Prophet Muhammad, there's no way of verifying it. And there's a lot of loose, hadith and fake hadith that are on the internet. Hadith being the sayings, examples of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or those who came afterwards, Sahaba. So, this enormous research information that is called the internet now, you can pretty much, find anything you want on there, but you're back to the reliability of this. And you're back to the understanding that it's not an academic pursuit. It's not taking from this book and that book and this book and this book and arriving at an opinion and understanding of your own within your own limited physical senses. Your physical senses, they lie to you all the time. Again, I have said before that you put your thumb up against the moon appears as smaller than your thumb. You can't be a judge of anything with your physical senses and be absolutely certain that that's true. I mean, you have holographs now. You have, Adobe Photoshop. So if you're looking at a picture and saying, I witnessed that this picture is, true and accurate portrayal of somebody engaged in an illicit activity, you can't rely on that picture anymore because it could be photoshopped. It could be completely, manufactured. And the same with video. You can take a video head and you can pretty much animate the live picture and create a holograph or create a video and mimic the voice pattern of the person that's speaking, and I could be completely fake in front of you right now. How do you know this is me? Because I look the same that I looked before, or because, I sound the same, or because I'm basically covering the same information. You really don't know. You don't know the reliability unless you know the person, unless you know the chain that goes back in that, old-time concept of storytelling, or telephone, they call it, that goes back and, quickly gets changed over generation after generation and turns into something completely different. So this concept of knowledge and understanding in the heart is the only place that true knowledge can reside and true knowledge can be protected. So the concept of academia, which has taken over the Muslim world, is really false. A very, very wise man told me that the only benefit you get from going to a major university today is that at the end of that program, you finally realize that you've learned absolutely nothing at all. What have you learned now in university that you can't get on Syria and talk about and gather more information than the university is presenting to you? It's a wealth of information that's available at your fingertips now. So the raw knowledge, the understanding of any given subject is there. And any person who has a gift of a certain level of intelligence just simply needs to know what questions to ask. You don't need a map anymore. You just plot in your final destination and you're taken there. You don't need to know how to read a map. You don't need to know anything. You just rely completely on the audio directions. So you don't even understand what a street sign is or a street, and very soon the cars will be driving themselves to your destination. It's a completely different scenario when you're talking about the Islamic sciences and true heavenly knowledge. And this is the subject of today's class, is the Hijama and the Isnad. And again, you can write volumes and volumes and volumes of information on this, and it will just leave you completely confused. And you'll be scratching your head and saying, does this bit of knowledge apply to this situation, and is that? And then people sit and argue about these things, just to no end, because they're trying to use their imagination and their understanding from an academic level, and they never arrive at the wisdom behind the teaching. So there's another famous story about somebody who went to Damascus and they wanted to learn about wudu. They wanted to, specialize and be, a specialist in, being a sheikh that understands everything there is to understand about making wudu. And believe it or not, there's huge amounts of volumes of information that you can learn about making wudu. The different schools of thought and the different circumstances and how much water is necessary for that water to be clean. It varies according to the school of thought. It varies to the region. It's a huge amount of information. That little piece, that little snippet of Islamic knowledge alone, just how to make the washing of the body to make yourself ritually pure for prayer. What are the conditions of all of that? And it's, you know, he literally spent 4 years going over volumes and volumes of information and getting different opinions from different scholars and studying the various schools of thought on this subject and that subject. You know, the Hanafi, you know, school and the Shafi school and just, you know, volumes of information. And he was very discouraged because at the end of that, you know, 4-year program that he took to try to learn and become a true expert so he could make a real contribution towards knowledge and understanding for others to be able to follow, they just, you know, confused him more than anything else because he really didn't arrive at any true wisdom for all these things. And it just, the amount of information was kind of just drowning him. And he came upon a true sheikh, you know, a sheikh of heavenly knowledge, and he was, you know, basically sitting, you know, on a stoop, I think, and, you know, crying and saying, "Oh my God, I wasted 4 years of my life." And the sheikh came up to him and said, "You know, what's wrong?" And of course, he already knew what was wrong. He has that sense about him. And the student said, "I spent 4 years of my life, you know. It was a real hardship to learn all these things, and I feel like I don't know anything." SubhanAllah. Must be wondering why I'm emotionally affected by something so simple that him saying, you know, he doesn't have the knowledge. Wow. But I'm affected by the sincerity of that statement, that this was a person truly seeking, you know, heavenly knowledge. He didn't want stories. He wanted the truth, and he wanted to convey that truth to others. He wasn't interested in an A plus, you know. He wasn't interested in a certificate. Ooh. Hmm. This affects me so much because I lived this and I saw this in Damascus over and over again. But the student very sincerely was, you know, upset. And the sheikh said, you know, what's wrong? And he said that, you know, I spent this 4 years of my life learning about every aspect of making wudu. And now, you know, I'm at the end of this and I still feel like I haven't attained any real knowledge of, you know, any real benefit or anything that I can put to use that is of benefit to mankind. And he said that, you know, you spend all this time learning about wudu. He said just all you had to do was understand that the water you drink from is the water that you can make wudu in. And your sense, when you come upon a body of water, you can pretty much see if it's running and you can see if it's clean and you can see if anything is growing on top of it. And of course, with today's, you know, chemical pollutants and whatnot, it becomes a different matter. But back when, you know, there was no such thing as, you know, glyphosates and pesticides and things that were spraying all over our crops that were invisible. it was fairly easy to be able to tell what is easy, for the human being to conceive of, that this is water that is able to be, consumed. And you can even taste a little bit of it and see if the taste is okay. And if you can drink it, then you can make wudu out of it. So if the water makes you sick, then it's not sufficient for wudu. And believe me, there's huge amounts of information on, if somebody urinates in a body of water, how big does that body of water have to be in order for it to be still clean? And really, it gets down to, liters. I mean, they've determined that there must be this amount of water. Well, you're not going to measure the amount of water and try to determine how much pee was, put in that body of water. So it becomes frustrating, and this is the frustration this person was trying to experience, or was experiencing. And the sheikh, who, told him the wisdom of it, just, make wudu out of the water that you drink. And so simple, so easy. So the same thing with, Hijama and Isnad. The ignorance is at an all-time high now. We are absolutely in an age of ignorance right now, the second age of ignorance. And you go on the internet and, you don't know if you're talking to a 12-year-old boy or you're talking to a, 50-year-old man. But everybody has an opinion and everybody, has no good manners not to be expressing those opinions to confuse people. Everybody's trying to get their ideas out there. And in doing so, it's just corrupting the religion, because then, there's no control. Everybody can say anything they want to say. So while the Ijaza and Isnad and the information surrounding these topics, again, can fill volumes and volumes and volumes of books, and you could study it for years and years. The important thing to understand here is that the chain of custody going back can't be broken, and it must be through people who are known to be of high moral character and standards. And nobody can argue that. But they do argue it. They, insist that you prove to them, if you're talking about these things on the internet, eventually somebody's going to come in and say, prove to me where in the hadith, the example of the Prophet, it says that you need to have an ijaza to do this. Or prove to me where, you have to have the isnad with the ijaza that goes back to prove the chain back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why can't I just go get a certificate? What makes you, think that you have the right to tell people that they need an ijaza to do hijama? That's not my right. I have no right to tell anybody anything. But what is factually correct and what is true is another matter. And what is important is that you learn how to do something from somebody who truly knows and truly understands. The academic process now is a shield for people. If you go to an academic institution and they get it wrong, they can fire the individual teacher and preserve the integrity of the institution. So the institution lives on. But in a system of teacher-student, master-student relationship, everything is on the teacher. And if the teacher says or does something wrong, it's his credibility in question. And it's that whole entire chain. You're dishonoring not just yourself, but you're dishonoring that chain all the way back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the burden of accuracy that is on your head and the responsibility is something you understand implicitly if you have been through this process and understand the importance of preserving that knowledge and understanding. So you're really, careful about what you say and what you do. And you're equally careful about who you authorize to carry on basically your reputation and the important knowledge that you're conveying to the person who is doing this. Hijama is something that can be taught in a day or 2 days. It's the technical aspects of Hijama, which all of you are saying, when are we going to learn Hijama? You are learning Hijama. The most important aspects of Hijama coming first here. And the technical aspects are easy. So it has become just, so simple for people to investigate the technical aspects of it. And then their egos telling them, this is for me. And they leave off everything else. I don't want to get into the badness that's going on in the Hijama industry right now. I don't even like to call it industry, field. I have to come up with a better term than that too. But that's probably next class. We'll go into that a little bit more. You'll be happy to actually see some Hijama being performed. But this concept of teacher-student relationship is something that you can't argue with. I mean, there's no way to say that me learning something over the internet is equal to somebody who has a teacher who has had a teacher who's had a teacher who's had a teacher back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that can be verified all the way back. Timothy Winters, Sheikh Abdul Karim out of England, or is it Oxford, I guess? Oxford? I think he teaches at Oxford. Very intelligent man, and he, speaks about some of these things that 1,000 years ago, none of this was questioned. 1,000 years ago, it was completely understood that you declared what school of thought you were in, and you declared what tariqah you belonged to. And there were thousands of tariqahs, thousands of chains that branched out from the original teachings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those who learned from him conveyed that teaching to others, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I can go into, the reasons why it's being trimmed back now, and that's a whole other topic. But it is being trimmed back now, and it is an important topic. And maybe, the advanced students will start getting into that if you get that far. But for the purposes of this introductory course, just know that that's kind of underway and happening right now, and with good reason. But the concept of ijaza and the concept of isnad are just critical to Islam, and they were always, widely accepted and understood. It's not until, recently that the Quran and Sunnah people that say that you can make up your mind just simply by reading the Quran yourself and going over the Hadith yourself, and you arrive at an intellectual, compilation of everything that you put in your brain, and you spit it back out, and it comes out a new opinion. And this is so open for corruption and so open for, just confusion and chaos, absolute chaos, that anybody can read a book and come up with a conclusion and a decision. It completely, destroys the very nature of Islam that preserves knowledge in a manner which is completely different than academia. So you have, what I call reluctant Sufis now, and closet Sufis, I call them, that are, using the academic world to try to legitimize Islam. And this trend has always been there, that the academic world, even going back to some of the, great universities, that the institution became more important than the sheikh. The jamia became over the jama'ah, so to speak. The teacher lost his authority, and the institution started taking control of that authority. And that is completely wrong in Islam. Is it okay for people to go to a central location to learn and be taught? Yes, of course. The mosque is a central location where people go, and they sit in a circle, and they sit with that teacher. And that teacher, sits in what is called subbas, which is an association. It's a heart association. It's a conveying of not only positive knowledge, but spiritual knowledge. And many people have said before that really the teacher's just speaking to keep you kind of entertained while he's working on your heart. So it's, of course, extremely useful information that you're sitting there learning, and you should, after the subbah, you should come back and you should, contemplate what has been said. But it's a contemplation in the heart, and if it doesn't take hold in the heart, it's not going to be real, and it can't be reconveyed without being polluted if it hasn't touched your heart. So that information and that knowledge is only as good as the purity and the character of the person who's sitting there in these circles of knowledge, understanding what is being said and the ability to convey that again without error. This is the Islamic method, and this is the one that's always been tried and true. And when you get into an academic situation where you're starting to pay tuition and you separate the scholar or the sheikh or the teacher from the institution, the credibility just gets destroyed. And now I'm a graduate of such and such a university, and you don't even know who is teaching you. So you can't even confirm that there was a teacher, oh yeah, well there were several teachers there, maybe I took this class from that person and this class from that person. There's no one person that was responsible. And the reduction of that responsibility was, to satisfy teachers' egos, to keep them from being responsible. It dilutes the responsibility, and it puts the responsibility on the academic institution. But yet, if something goes wrong and something's said which is not correct, it's not the institution that suffers. They'll fire a teacher, make a scapegoat out of him. So, like a 501c3 nonprofit organization, it's a shield that really destroys charity. It really destroys true religion. It really destroys the work that's being done, and it gives an entity control over you by knowing what your finances are. It's really demonic, when you get down to it. So are academic institutions all bad, and, do you, not benefit from going to them? Well, I went to Abu Noor University for a Khatib and Da'i program. And I learned because I, went through this process and I understood that this is not correct. At the end of that process, I knew that it was not correct. And the reason why I cried, most people think this is silly, because it's not that big of a deal, but it is to me because I've seen it, and I've lived it. That hundreds and hundreds of people came to Damascus seeking knowledge. They were sincere people, and they traveled under great hardship. Nobody in the West, or very few, would support these converts. Basically, most of them were converts. A lot of them were converts, or second generation, immigrant Muslims who were looking for something different other than what they were being taught at home or in the mosque. Very sincere people that were, really struggling to travel, around the world to obtain some sort of benefit for their own communities and benefit for humanity, and to access and understand, true Islamic knowledge. And they would go in the manner what they were, trained to go, which was, through these higher education, universities. And they would pay huge amounts of money to go and take this stuff. The communities wouldn't, pick up the bill. They wouldn't fund their food and their lodging. And the few that, did, they were there a year, and the communities just left them high and dry, and they were left to survive on their own. And the only ones that were able to continue were the ones that, started teaching English or, consulted or did something that made them be able to get some sort of an income. And English, of course, was the biggest choice that you could do. And that's what I did. I started teaching English at the American Embassy. And boy, I could write 20 books on that subject too. What a nightmare. I mean, just the cultural perversion that institution was. It wasn't about teaching English. It was about infiltrating, communities with the material world and trying to disrupt the true, clean, wonderful nature of the human being that was there. They were taken hook, line, and sinker into this, madness of materialism. And it taught materialism. I mean, that was the English, the bait was the great American, citizenship card that you might be able to get if you learned English and you could, and somehow migrate to the land of opportunity. So these things are really close to my heart. And when I was there, I had the unbelievably good fortune, and my wife had the good fortune of finding one of these true teachers, one of these true sheikhs, one of these people of heavenly knowledge, these people who sat at the feet of their teacher and who conveyed to them a pouring of heavenly knowledge into their hearts and taught them from what they, group together now as traditional teaching, sitting at the foot of a sheikh or a teacher. But it's still not understood very well, and it's still extremely ambiguous, and it's still mixed in with academia and certificates and tuitions and all of this stuff. And people really, really don't have a sense of how important that is and what it's trying to accomplish and what it's trying to achieve. They think it's just sitting there and learning and processing stuff in your mind, and that's not what it is. It's a process of purification. It's a process of cleaning your heart so that your heart, which is an endless vessel of knowledge, can contain that information precisely and reiterate it to others without corruption. And the only way you do that is to plug in, okay? This is what the important aspect of Ijaza is. It is not even the transmission from one person to another. It's not, I've told this person a story, and I've told that person a story, and I've told that person a story, and they all memorize that story, and they promise not to corrupt it, and they promise not to alter it in any way, and they promise not to abuse it or use it for their own advantage or benefit. That's, like taking an oath, and, if you break that oath, but you can't keep from breaking that oath unless you have some sort of power to prevent that from happening. And this power is a power they call Rabita, which is a heart connection. And if you don't plug into that power station, it doesn't matter how, beautiful a blender you have. Even if that blender has, top-notch batteries in it that aren't rechargeable, it's eventually going to run out of power. And it is only when you can plug that into the actual power source that you have an endless, offering of power to that blender, and it can continue working for you and producing smoothie after smoothie. So it's a silly example, but it is critically important to understand that there's a process of spirituality in this and a process of connecting to a teacher that provides you with spiritual guidance and spiritual understanding that is coming from them. It's not coming from yourself. So when I start these classes, I start with A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. We seek refuge in Allah from the cursed Satan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the most merciful, the most gracious, and we say La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-azim, that there is no strength and no power except from Allah alone. So we're saying that nothing is from us. We're not the power source. He is the power source. And then we say, medet, medet, medet. Medet means support. Give me support. Give me, the ability to convey and remember and understand what it is that needs to be conveyed. And don't make it from myself. Make it from this source, this, chain, this power station. There is a spiritual power. There is a spiritual understanding, and there is something that can bring you through that process. Like an Olympian athlete who trains physically, you must train yourself spiritually to acquire the higher levels of competitiveness in the case of an Olympian. But to acquire the higher levels of spiritual understanding and heavenly knowledge, there is a process to that. And this process is through the student-teacher relationship of connecting to that teacher, and that teacher becomes a guide and a source of strength for your life, for your pursuit. And without that, you're just on your own with your imagination, picking and choosing what you want. There are so many of what I call, again, these reluctant or closet Sufis who are so fearful of saying the word Sufi. And understand there is nothing called Sufism in Islam. There's nothing called, Sunni. There's nothing called Shia. There's nothing, that should be referred to other than that you're Muslim. La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Abdullah Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's it. But we've taken on these meanings because as it becomes poisoned over the years, you want to say, no, we're not, a part of that understanding. We're part of this understanding. And simply saying Muslim doesn't suffice. So you tell people that, you're part of Tasawwuf, and they don't understand Tasawwuf so much. So the terminology of Sufism is taken over. And again, people, it's just a word. Don't get too excited about it. But the fear that has been placed in the propaganda campaign to, put down true Islam and true spirituality and true enlightenment, true heavenly teaching, is an effort by the devil to pollute and destroy the very fabric of a system of life that can bring you success, success beyond your wildest dreams, happiness beyond your wildest dreams. It is not this do's and don'ts and silly, stupid, understanding that so many people try to convey over the internet, and with these arguments and these fighting and, you have no right to speak, and you absolutely have no right to argue about such sacred knowledge. You have to go back to the people who truly know and people who truly understand. And of course, there's different levels of those people. And trying to find the highest one for yourself really is contingent on how, good an athlete you could be. And not everybody can be an Olympic athlete. So this is incredibly important for people to understand. And the fact that everybody's so afraid of it because Saudi money was key in establishing organizations in America, and Saudi money was key in building mosques, and everybody ran to Saudi Arabia. Very sincere people. There was an organization out in New Mexico called Dar al-Islam, started by a brother by the name of Durkee. Forgive me, I forget his whole name. Well, I'll put it in the classroom settings, a link to that. And very sincere, he wanted to start a prime example of a community that was living in truly a wonderful example of what Islam could be, predominantly set up for converts. And the Salafi, Wahhabi, call it whatever you want. I call them the do's and don'ts people. Use their money and their influence, and he succumbed to their, I think, offers of money, which came with all these strings attached to it. And pretty soon it got turned into a board of directors and a nonprofit, and the aspect of having one leader and one sheikh and one person in charge evaporated. And of course it was destroyed. And it sits there pretty much dormant, doing absolutely nothing. They have like, a youth program or something like that. But this huge land that was like 9,000 acres in a gorgeous, gorgeous part of New Mexico, which is very spiritual. I mean, I've had some spiritual encounters with, the old Indian tribes up there that just, were true human beings and good people that lived in that area, and that brings an energy to that place. But it was destroyed, and it is not destroyed, by accident or by greed or by ego. It's destroyed in a concerted effort by Shaitan, Satan, and his followers who, want to please him. And this is, because the money is there, the influence on combating and destroying anything to do with spirituality, which is the essence of the Islamic faith, which is completely lost. I mean, people find it in Eastern religions, Buddhism and whatnot, but the true Islamic teachings are just, so much richer and so much more amazing and beautiful than anything you hear in Buddhism. I'm not down on Buddhism by any means. There's some, wonderful aspects about it. And they're all intertwined and connected, and there's, truths that run absolutely through all of the religions that you can extract pieces of. But the real, true journey that can take you into heavenly stations and heavenly knowledge is in this manner of tasawwuf and the manner of student-teacher relationship. And if you've lost that, you've lost everything. So they know the key. They know what to attack, and they know what to destroy. And these reluctant closet Sufis are, trying to walk this balancing act of keeping a very large audience happy with them, so they continue to get donations to run their academic institutions and their nonprofit organizations and their big grand mosques who, don't really serve communities. And only recently, until after 9/11, did they start feeding some of the homeless and hungry in order to show that they were really, truly contributing to America. And, it was all public relations. It wasn't really sincere efforts to change what's going on in America. Really, most of what's happening is that it's a huge drain on the economy, because a lot of these people coming, which, boy, is another 300 books I could write on, the really intentional, onslaught of migrants into this country in order to, pick and choose the worst possible Muslims to run some of these organizations. And again, I'm going to catch a lot of heat for saying this, but it's, the intelligence community overseas rewards people for their obedience, and they're giving them useful information. And these are people that grew up in, madrasas overseas that understand the positive knowledge or the book knowledge of Islam, so they can recite Quran and they can tell you about Hadith and they can sound like they're, total experts, and they can grow a beard. But really, their power is coming from their association with these intelligence agencies that they've been, infiltrating their own communities and giving back information. And they're rewarded with, citizenship after a while, and they're rewarded with, businesses and academic, higher education, scholarships and whatnot. And very similar, like I said before, to this clergy response units. These big mega churches are all run by people that have been pretty much recruited by government agencies and said that, you can have your Rolls Royce and you can have your 501c3 and you can continue cheating the people that you're talking to as long as you cooperate with us. And in a state of an emergency, you become the mouthpiece for the government to make sure that these crazy religious people don't, start taking to the streets and attacking the government. So your job is to keep them passive and tell them that they're supposed to be peaceful and turn the other cheek. right? And they all agree happily because they want their Rolls Royce and they want their power and they want to be seen as the leader of this great big church. And you can see it. Go on the internet and look at it. It's Clergy Response Team. I talked to earlier about it, but I forgot the actual name of it. Clergy Response Team. And know that it's, in every organization that has influence over populations. So news is one of the biggest organizations that has influence over populations, and it's completely infiltrated. And you have think tanks that identify these people early on. They set up the whole academic system so you become debt slaves. And then after you get $200,000, $300,000 worth of higher, Oxford education or Harvard or Yale or whatever you're going to, and you're buried, completely, totally buried in debt, then they come to you and say you can get out of this debt if you work with us. And they see your natural talent and being able to sit in front of a camera and, talk about the news, and they're gonna nurture you into that position and put you into that position. And everybody thinks that you just graduated from school and that you got that job. No, you've been weaned for that job from a very early time. And some of this goes back, with the truly spiritual, enlightened children. They target those children, when they're extremely young and start pumping them full of medications and tell them that they have, attention deficit disorder, and what they're doing is destroying the top prospects for spirituality. These children that are problem children, or not obedient and don't show up when the bell rings. Those are the champions of freedom and champions of true faith and true belief. Shaitan, it's Satan. It's just horrible. So this, millions and billions of dollars are spent on propaganda to try to sell you on this, this do's and don'ts system of religion. And it's, whatever pops up its head, it doesn't matter if Christianity pops up its head or Judaism pops up its head or, Buddhism pops up its head, it's going to be smashed as effectively as it possibly can in order to keep the masses of people, from being empowered. And religion is supposed to do that. It's supposed to be, just incredibly independent. So you shouldn't have a 501c3. You should, and you do. You have the right in America just to be what they call a free church now. But boy, you start that and you just get attacked. And we got attacked like crazy. Our recent experience up in Connecticut, which again, another 4 or 5 books to talk about that subject. But they did not like our presence in that town. But something better will come. And I hopefully have good news for everybody about what's coming, inshallah. I don't need to give you good news. It's just generally good news, but you have to grab hold of it yourself and start pursuing it and understanding it. So I told you this is volumes and volumes of information. The Hijama, the Isnad, we have barely even scratched the surface, and you can go into the academics of it. It's good to read and understand some of this technical academic information because it is so vast, and it is important for you to understand the knowledge base of it, in your brain as well. I'm not telling you to completely dismiss your intellect and walk around in a daze all day just saying, Allah, Allah. Although there's some people who do that and seem to get by very well. But generally, you have to use all your faculties. You have to use what has been given to you, physically, spiritually, mentally, to arrive at these things. But the problem is the spiritual is completely absent from that equation. And if you don't exercise that and you don't recognize it, at least understand it, you're going to lose it. So, didn't really go in the direction that I thought I was going to go on this class. And I thought I was going to, talk about things that were more technical to try to give you an understanding of this Hijaz and Isnad. And again, there's going to be loads of information. I'll probably continue adding it to the course material. Cordoba University has some good information written down about the Hijama process and the Isnad. But just understand this, there is a power station that you can plug into. And without that plug, you're nothing. And you're nothing with that plug, too. You're just a conduit of that electricity into the mechanism, which can be useful to others, but only if you're plugged in. If you're not plugged in, it's just a paperweight. That blender becomes a paperweight. And what good is a blender? A paperweight can be much more efficient if it's just a piece of ball of glass or something. So it doesn't even make a useful paperweight if it's not plugged in. And that's what you have across the board now, are these, people that aren't plugged in, that are just paperweights. Don't be fooled by these reluctant, closet Sufis that are apologizing, left and right for their spirituality. And it makes a mockery, really, of the spirituality, and it's a hardship on the people who truly are pursuing a higher understanding and a better method to attain to heavenly knowledge and heavenly understanding. And it really puts a burden on them, and it's gotten to the point where they're ostracizing the people who are truly in pursuit of those higher levels of spiritual enlightenment. And without that, religion is nothing. It's just back to the do's and don'ts, and it will cause war, and it will cause hardship, because you're not getting rid of your animalistic nature. You're pursuing your ego, and you are not putting down that ego. It just runs wild. So until you find a methodology and a teacher who can control that and show you, put a mirror in front of you and say, look, what you're doing, and you feel that, that disgust that you have when you understand and start to recognize your animal nature, and slowly that purification process happens, and the senses of the heart open, and unbelievable things are possible. And you have these groups of people now that are apologizing for this. I'll say one last thing. We sat with It's very hard to speak about these things, because every time I talk about them, I think about Damascus. And the hardship that people are suffering there is just unimaginable. Nobody gives a damn. But back when it was a beautiful place to sit and learn and experience these things, and true knowledge and teaching were available. And if I were to name names, you'd be surprised who I'm talking about. But I won't bother with that. There's no need. Those people listening to this know who I'm talking about. They would flock to this, Abu Noor school. And it provided some benefit. I mean, you're sincere and you're running after that education, and you want to learn something, and nobody's, saying the people that went there weren't sincere. They certainly were, and they are. But they were on the wrong way. They were on the academic way, and unless they came to a realization that they, were on that wrong way, they wouldn't be finding it another way. And even though they dabbled in the other way, they didn't give it enough attention and credibility. So they pursued the certificate. They pursued the certificate that they could come back and beat people in the head with and say, I'm a big sheikh now. And that's not Islam. It's not a prescribed program of 4 years and then you get what you paid for. That is not Islam in the least. It's sitting with a teacher who tells you when you are ready. And that is the only process that's acceptable in Islam. So my wife and I and a small handful of other people, and I won't even put a number on it because the numbers don't matter. But what matters is that the true teachings of this heart connection, the subbas, the true heavenly knowledge, the pursuit of real Islam was sitting there available to people, and only a handful of people showed up, and it was free. It was 100% free. There was never any expectation that you would support or take care of this person that was teaching you. There was never a fee or a donation that was demanded. There was never tuition, certainly, that was offered. And I have a hard time charging even a small $100 price that I do for this. But this is a weeding out process, and that's the only one I've been able to figure out to make it work over the internet and to make it work in the West, because people just have lost the understanding of what true charity, what true donations are, and their responsibility for supporting and helping somebody who is teaching them. But that expectation is never placed on you when you're in a circle like that. You're never asked to help and support the person who's doing all this. It's completely free, and if you don't do it, you don't do it. Your measly little money isn't going to support that person. Allah is supporting that person. Allah is giving that person his riz. He doesn't need anything from you. And believe me, that money can fall from heaven just huge amounts of wealth. It's up to Allah what level of riz that you have, sustenance. So the point is, and what I want to leave you with is that there was that knowledge available, and it is always available for the people searching it out. And these people that came and struggled to get these great distances and pay these enormous, tuitions and boarding and struggling to teach English to stay alive and fighting and trying to get the academic knowledge they needed to be able to complete their studies and get a certificate to come back and work at a prison. Or to work for one of these, do's and don'ts mosques that have a board that are going to just, rattle you to death about, what you're supposed to be doing, what you're not supposed to be doing by doctors and lawyers that have no idea what they're doing. But, again, another program perhaps, but the point I want to leave you with more than anything is that teaching is absolutely available, and people aren't running after it. And that's because we are in the age of ignorance, and people don't understand these things. And, it's coming out now. It's starting to resurface, and it's in preparation for Isa, Jesus, alayhi salam, his return, and Imam Mehdi's return. And that's part of what I was talking about. It's being clipped back, but hope to share this with the true Ijaza candidates who are ready for a level of teaching which is not, from books or from videos, watching them and looking at them online and deciding that I am big Hijama expert now. And I am going to be seen as a leader in the society. So, if you can put your ego aside and you can, come and learn a little bit, and if you pass this level, you'll get into the Hijama intensive, which is pretty much just it's a heaven camp, we call it, instead of a hell camp. So the football people and stuff, we used to have a hell week, and we'll call this our heaven week. So probably more difficult than hell week. So be prepared. But I'll leave you with that, and I'll leave you with the request, the humble request for you to pray in whatever manner you choose fit, or to put out the energy that you are able to put out of goodness to the many people of Damascus that are suffering untold torment and destruction. The city of Aleppo has just been wiped off the face of the earth. Cities surrounding the Damascus area have just been bombed to oblivion, and this is one of the most spiritual places you'll ever encounter. Just unbelievable. It saddens me to no end, and it's so difficult to talk about it. So I've gone over time now, 5 minutes, and I apologize. I told you an hour, but I lied. So please forgive me. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم سورة الفاتحة بسم الله آمين آمين شكر الله الحمد لله